Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, June 30th, 2025. All right, so the first thing I want to go over today is the big news from the weekend. Well, this came out on Friday morning. There was a big report from Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, that revealed Israeli soldiers are actually being ordered to fire on unarmed Palestinians in Gaza who are seeking aid. And Kyle Anzalone wrote this up for us on Friday for antiwar.com, and it was our top story all weekend. But I wanted to go through some of the stuff from the actual report, some of the testimony here from Israeli soldiers. And now, if you watch this show, if you read antiwar.com, you've been aware that there have been these massacres of Palestinians while they're seeking aid at these distribution sites run by the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And this has just been going on just about every day since the end of May. And a lot of people were denying that these massacres were even taking place. I thought there was enough evidence. There was so much, a lot of eyewitness accounts. You heard from hospital officials, doctors describing casualties from these shooting events near the aid sites. And then here we have confirmation from Israeli sources. Not only confirmation that this is happening, but they're saying that these are orders that they're getting. So I'll read from some of this report here, some of the important points. So Israeli soldiers in Gaza told Haaretz that the army has deliberately fired at Palestinians near aid distribution sites over the past month. Conversations with officers and soldiers reveal that commanders ordered troops to shoot at crowds to drive them away or disperse them, even though it was clear they posed no threat. One soldier described the situation as a total breakdown of the Israeli Defense Forces' ethical codes in Gaza. Not that I think they have many ethical codes at this point. According to the Ministry of Health in Gaza, 549 people have been killed near aid centers or while waiting for UN food trucks since May 27th. So Haaretz has learned that the military advocate general has instructed the IDF generals staff's fact-finding assessment mechanism to investigate suspected war crimes at these sites. And in a statement after this investigation came out, what did Netanyahu say? What was his response? Again, there's testimony here from Israeli soldiers. He said it was a blood libel. He just cried anti-Semitism. Just completely absurd here. And this is his defense for basically everything. So I want to get to some of the quotes here. So this is what one Israeli soldier said, quote, "It's a killing field. Where I was stationed, between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. They're treated like a hostile force, no crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable. Heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars. Then once the center opens, the shooting stops and they know that they can approach. Our form of communication is gunfire. We open fire early in the morning if someone tries to get in line from a few hundred meters away, and sometimes we just charge at them from close range, but there's no danger to the forces. I'm not aware of a single instance of return fire. There's no enemy. There's no weapons," end quote. He also said that the activity in his area of service is referred to as Operation Salted Fish, the name of the Israeli version of the children's game Red Light, Green Light. So think about that for a second. I mean, just really sick stuff here. And, you know, one thing that in this report is that it says the concern from the military about these massacres is not out of a moral concern. It's about a PR concern. They're worried about this stuff getting out, not because they think what they're doing is wrong, but because they're worried that it could affect, their public relations, and essentially that means it could threaten support from the U.S. But so far, we haven't seen any indication that this is making the U.S., the Trump administration, reconsider supporting this military. Another soldier said, quote, "Gaza doesn't interest anyone anymore. It's become a place with its own set of rules. The loss of human life means nothing. It's not even as an unfortunate incident like they used to say, end quote. So again, we have more, an officer here serving in the security detail of a distribution center said, quote, working with a civilian population when your only means of interaction is opening fire, that's highly problematic to say the least. It's neither ethically nor morally acceptable for people to have to reach or fail to reach a humanitarian zone under tank fire, snipers, and mortar shells, end quote. And this is what we've seen people describe in some of these massacres. It's not like it was just Israeli soldiers shooting at them with guns. It's also tank fire, mortar fire. There's been reports of boats firing at them. I mean, and drones as well. I mean, they're opening fire with everything that they have. So another thing I want to mention here is this section about contractors. And according to accounts from commanders and fighters, the IDF was supposed to maintain a safe distance from Palestinian population areas and food distribution points. However, the actions of the forces on the ground do not align with the operational plan. And so essentially, one of their sources tells them that a private contractor working in Gaza with engineering equipment receives $1,500 US for every house that they demolish. I mean, so they're getting paid $1,500 for each house that they flatten. And essentially what they're saying here is that as a result, these contractors are going outside of areas where they're not supposed to go. And then if Palestinians are near them, then they get shot. And this is part of the strategy to completely destroy Gaza, to completely make it uninhabitable. So just a huge report here, and I'll be curious to see if any reporters asked, the State Department, the White House about this on Monday, because there was a time when the White House was denying that, in a way, denied that these massacres were happening. Just really despicable stuff. And I mean, it's just, I'm at a loss for words to describe what this means, what these horrors are that the U.S. is supporting in Gaza. All right, so now to today's page, the first story that we have at the top of antiwar.com. Trump says the U.S. will not stand for Netanyahu trial. So on Saturday, President Trump doubled down on his call for an end to the trial against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying the U.S. was not going to stand for the Israeli leader's prosecution. He wrote on Truth Social, quote, "It is terrible what they are doing in Israel to Bibi Netanyahu. He is a war hero and a prime minister who did a fabulous job working with the United States to bring great success in getting rid of the dangerous nuclear threat in Iran," end quote. The president said that the trial against Netanyahu, Netanyahu is also wanted by the ICC for war crimes in Gaza. And I mean, this is what Trump says the day after this big report comes out. That it's just, man. Anyway, sorry. So Trump says it's a witch hunt. He mentioned U.S. military aid to Israel, and he's appearing to suggest here that he might be willing to leverage U.S. military aid to get the charges against Gaza. Sorry, I'm all over the place tonight. To get the charges against Netanyahu dropped. So he's suggesting, I'll read exactly what he said, but it sounds like he's suggesting he's threatening to cut off military aid or willing to leverage military aid to get the charges against Netanyahu dropped. Not to get them to stop slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza, to keep Netanyahu out of prison. And I can't think of someone who deserves to be in prison more than Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump said, quote, "The United States of America spends billions of dollars a year, far more than any other nation, protecting and supporting Israel. We are not going to stand for this. We just had a great victory with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu at the helm, and this greatly tarnishes our victory. Let Bibi go. He's got a big job to do," end quote. And this is the second time that Trump said something like this, calling for the charges to be dropped. And after the first time, Netanyahu requested that the trial that was scheduled for this week be delayed and pushed back. And the court has granted that request, at least temporarily suspending the next hearings and trials. And this has been happening quite a bit, that you see the trials and the hearings get pushed back. All right, so the next one here, Trump calls for a Gaza deal, but Israel is only discussing a temporary truce. So President Trump on Sunday called for a deal that would release the remaining Israeli captives in Gaza, but there's no sign that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is ready to end his genocidal war. So Trump said in a post on Truth Social, he just wrote, "Make the deal in Gaza, get the hostages back." And he signed it DJT, and it's all caps. And so according to Israel Hayom, and there's other Israeli reporting that said similar things, the Israeli Security Cabinet was expected to hold a meeting on Sunday night that at this point has already happened to discuss the prospect of a Gaza deal, but one that would involve only a temporary ceasefire. And this is an idea that's been rejected by Hamas. Hamas's long-standing position is that it's willing to release the remaining Israelis in exchange for a permanent ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Israel has been rejecting that. They don't want the permanent ceasefire. Sources close to Netanyahu told Israel Hayom that the Israeli leader has not given up on his goals and that ending the war is not under consideration. Israeli officials are discussing the idea of a deal previously put forward by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that would free some captives, but it would be followed by a return to military operations. So again, a temporary ceasefire. I believe the last one of these that was on the table was for Hamas to release 10 hostages for a 60-day ceasefire. Mahmoud Mardawi, a senior Hamas official, said on Sunday that Netanyahu does not want a deal because he is putting forward impossible conditions, and he is insisting on selecting the names of 10 hostages to be released instead of all of them. The report said that IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir favors a temporary truce to allow the Israeli military to regroup for further operations. Several ministers in the cabinet are opposed to the idea. They don't want a ceasefire at all because they fear that a temporary deal could be permanent, which would be the best case scenario, obviously, but that's what they're afraid of. And while Trump is calling for a deal, there's no sign that he's willing to put the pressure on Netanyahu for this. He's willing to put pressure on the state of Israel, I guess, the attorney general, to drop the charges against Netanyahu, but he's not willing to put the pressure on Netanyahu, on the Netanyahu government. And there was an analysis published by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz that said, in order to reach a deal in Gaza, Trump must pressure Netanyahu, but he is instead coddling the Israeli leader. So from this analysis, it says, quote, Trump's claim that the Netanyahu trial is somehow an impediment to the hostage deal does not hold water. The main obstacle to a hostage and ceasefire deal has been, and continues to be Netanyahu's refusal to end the war. Hamas hasn't budged on this demand in the last 100 days, despite heavy losses in Gaza and the killing of some of its last remaining senior leaders, end quote. So as long as Trump doesn't put the pressure where it's needed, I don't think we'll see a ceasefire. I mean, I hope and I pray for a ceasefire in Gaza every day. I try to, but just realistically, until Trump's ready to flip that switch, turn off the military aid, I think this is going to go on. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 86 in Gaza, including aid seekers. So after that big expose, they are still killing Palestinians on their way to get food. So Gaza's health ministry said on Sunday that Israeli forces killed at least 86 Palestinians and wounded 365 over the previous 24-hour period, as Israeli strikes continue to hit targets across the Strip and Israeli troops continue to gun down people seeking aid. Very sad picture in this story of two children who were killed by Israeli airstrikes. And among those killed were 18 people who were seeking aid, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed while attempting to get food since the GHF began operating to 583. The latest aid killings come after a report from Haaretz, as I mentioned, that Israeli troops are being ordered to fire on unarmed Palestinians. And there was also heavy airstrikes in Gaza, specifically in northern Gaza. They ordered another evacuation from the area and ramped up attacks on Sunday. And not long before I started recording this, I was hearing reports of very heavy, like things got much heavier in northern Gaza, that Israel's really bombing the place. So again, the atrocities and the horror goes on every day, all supported by the United States government. All right, so the next one here, 100,000 dead, what we know about Gaza's true death toll. So this is another article from Haaretz, from the Israeli newspaper, about how the real death toll in Gaza is likely 100,000. And this draws on a new study it's by a guy named Professor Michael Spaggett, he's an economist at Holloway College at the University of London. He's written dozens of articles on the wars in Iraq, Syria, and Kosovo, among others. And this week, he and a team of researchers published the most comprehensive study to date on the subject of mortality in the Gaza Strip. With the aid of Palestinian political scientist Dr. Khalil Shikaki, the team surveyed 2,000 households in Gaza, comprising almost 10,000 people. They concluded that as of January 2025, some 75,200 people died a violent death in Gaza during the war, the vast majority caused by Israeli munitions. And at the time, the health ministry's number was about 45,000. So this is that means that the health ministry's number is a 40% undercount. And there is a report by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine that was actually published in The Lancet. And they found that about the same, that it's a 40% undercount. And this is only of the Palestinians who have died by violence. These numbers don't factor in the people killed due to causes by the siege, medical shortages that lead to deaths, things like that. So if you extrapolate that, the health ministry's current numbers are 56,000. This would put, based on this number, would put the violent death toll around 90,000. And then you factor in the indirect deaths, and it would probably put the violent toll around like 88,000. And then you factor the indirect deaths, and I think that gets you easily over 100,000. Their estimate for indirect deaths as of January 2025 was about 8,500, which is a pretty conservative estimate. But I think now with that very long starvation blockade, when they were not letting any aid or any medical supplies in, that those indirect deaths have probably risen. So I think it's safe to say it's easily over 100,000 is the death toll. And you look at some of these numbers. So this study found that 56% of the casualties of the dead were women and children. And one thing, I want to find it here because I think this statistic really... this statistic really says a lot. So data compiled and published by Spaggett indicates that the proportion of women and children killed via a violent death in Gaza is more than double the proportion in almost every other recent conflict, including, for example, the civil wars in Kosovo, northern Ethiopia, Syria, Colombia, Iraq, and Sudan. Again, in all those wars, the number of women and children killed compared to them in Gaza is more than double. So that is pretty significant. And these are big wars here. Iraq and Syria and Sudan, in Ethiopia also. I mean, these are not small conflicts, and these are conflicts where there's been a lot of atrocities and war crimes. I mean, it really goes to show the number of, it's just, we see it in the pictures and videos every day. The women and children being killed and wounded. All right, so the next one here, Israeli siege on Gaza starved at least 66 children to death. This article is from The Cradle. So Gaza's government media office announced on June 28th that at least 66 children have died from starvation since Israel's siege of Gaza began, blaming the deaths on Tel Aviv's blockade, crossing closures, and the ban on baby formula. So they didn't say it explicitly. As far as I understand, this is 66 starved to death since March 2nd, since Israel that was when they imposed the total blockade, which they have eased very slightly. They set up the GHF sites, and they've also been letting some trucks in, but they're still blocking a lot of stuff. All the doctors are saying that there's baby formula shortages because they're not letting enough in. But the statement didn't say explicitly if it was since March 2nd or overall. But they're saying 66 children starved to death. And just the other day, 2 infants starved to death died of malnutrition because of the lack of formula, because of the lack of milk and formula. And the women, the mothers who are suffering from malnutrition cannot struggle or cannot make breast milk at all. So more of the horrors that the U.S. is supporting in Gaza. The next one here, my journey to get aid in Gaza was like Squid Game. This article is from Middle East Eye, and it's just an account from one man in Gaza going to one of these aid sites and seeing people get killed. I would recommend just go and read it because it really it's just such a crazy thing that these people have to do to try to survive, to make this treacherous journey. And he returned home with just a few cans of beans and like barely any food. You have to go risk your life on like a few mile trek, and you might not even get anything. All right, so the next one here, Iran doubts Israel will uphold ceasefire. So Major General Abdul Rahim Musafi, the chief of staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, expressed doubt on Sunday that Israel will uphold the ceasefire that was reached last week after 12 days of an Israeli-initiated war. So Musafi, he replaced Mohammad Bagheri, who was the head of Iran's armed forces, but he was killed by Israel on June 13th in that initial wave where they killed many of the military leaders. And so he made these comments in a conversation with the Saudi defense minister. He said, quote, "We did not initiate the war, but we responded to the aggressor with all our might. And since we have real doubts about the enemy's adherence to its commitments, including the ceasefire, we are prepared to give it a strong response if it repeats the aggression," end quote. So Musavi's comments came after Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz threatened that Israel could strike Iran despite the ceasefire. Katz said that he instructed the IDF to come up with an enforcement plan aimed at maintaining Israel's air superiority, preventing nuclear advancement and missile production. So basically saying he's ordered the IDF to prepare attacks on Iran. He said, quote, "We will act consistently to thwart threats of this kind. I suggest to the toothless snake's head in Tehran to understand and beware. Operation Rising Lion was just the preview of a new Israeli policy. After October 7th, immunity is over," end quote. So in an interview, Katz suggested that Israel could follow a model similar to Lebanon, where Israel agreed to a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024, but has committed thousands of truce violations and is now bombing the country on a near daily basis. However, things are different in Lebanon and Iran. In Lebanon, Israel, it seems like, depleted Hezbollah's capacities pretty good because Hezbollah hasn't fired back since the ceasefire went into effect. I feel silly even calling it a ceasefire. It is essentially a deal that allows Israel to strike southern Lebanon, but Hezbollah hasn't hit back. Iran, until the last moment, was hitting Israel hard with its ballistic missiles. So, and I mean, Iran's making it clear that they will, if Israel tries to do some sort of limited strikes, that they're going to hit back as well. So I think this is a very different situation than Lebanon. But that's what Katz is saying. That's the kind of pressure they want to go to. All right, so the next one here, IAEA chief says that Iran could resume enrichment within months. So Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, has said that Iran could likely resume enriching uranium within a few months, despite the U.S. and Israeli attacks on its nuclear facilities. He said, quote, "They can, in a matter of months, I would say, a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium, or less than that," end quote. He also acknowledged that the fate of Iran's stockpile of uranium enriched at 60% is unclear. And of course, Trump has insisted that Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated and that the bombing campaign set back the nuclear program decades. But Trump is also threatening to bomb Iran again if it moves to restart its uranium enrichment program. Trump was asked over the weekend or on Friday if Iran enriched uranium at a level that concerned him, would he bomb Iran again? And he said, sure, without question. And so this is the big question: is what is Iran going to do? Are they going to, try to restart their enrichment program quickly? If they do it, are they going to do it in secret? They have passed that law to suspend cooperation with the IAEA until their nuclear facilities are secure. So that tells me that they're going to try to do things without any oversight. And if Trump learns about some of this activity, what is he going to do? Is he going to bomb Iran again? Is Israel going to start bombing them again? This is the question. And I don't think that this war is over unless there's a fundamental change. As I said, unless with the Gaza stuff, unless Trump decides to really cut off or threaten to cut off military aid to Israel. This is something obviously Netanyahu wants, to restart this conflict. I'm sure they want to replenish their air defenses and everything, but it's just, there's a lot of factors here that could prevent this from, that could make this whole thing restart. And a big thing is, again, what is Iran going to do exactly? And how is Trump going to react? We don't know these things yet. All right, so the next one here, Israeli bombing of Iran's Evin prison killed 71. So Iran's judiciary announced on Sunday that Israel's June 23rd bombing of the Evin prison in Tehran killed 71 people. And that number has also been corroborated by a U.S.-based rights group that is critical of the Iranian government. So we have this number from both sources. So this is Ashgar Jahangir. He's a spokesman for the judiciary in Iran. He said, quote, during the attack on the Evin prison, 71 people, including prison administrative staff, soldiers, convicted inmates, families of the prisoners who had come for visitation or legal follow-up, and people living nearby were martyred, end quote. He also said that the attack was a full-fledged crime. And he said the bombing occurred during visitation hours when inmates were meeting with their families and social workers. And according to the U.S.-based human rights activists in Iran, at least 35 of those killed were staff members. 2 were inmates. 1 was a woman visiting a judge about her imprisoned husband. And another person who was killed was a bystander just walking near the prison. And they have yet to identify the rest of the people who were killed. See the aftermath of the strike here. And according to Israeli media, the strike on the prison, which is known to hold political prisoners, was an apparent effort to help prisoners escape. And Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed that Israel struck the prison, but he did not give an official reason for the attack. So when it comes to the numbers, the total numbers of people killed in this war in Iran, the Iranian government has put it over 600. And then this rights group, again, that's based in the U.S., they say they have non-governmental sources. They've put the death toll significantly higher. They're saying that 1,190 people were killed, including 436 civilians, 435 military personnel, and 319 people who remain unidentified. They say at least 65 children and 49 women were killed as well. All right, so the next one here, the Senate votes down Iran War Powers Resolution. So this article is from Kyle Anselin at the Libertarian Institute. So the Senate rejected a War Powers Resolution, which would have required the president to get approval from Congress before striking Iran. And this comes after Trump bombed Iranian nuclear sites without permission from Congress. And on Friday, the Senate voted 53-47 to reject the War Powers Resolution. This was the one put forward by Tim Kaine. And so there was only 2 people that didn't vote with their party. One was John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who is extremely, extremely pro-Israel. And he voted against it. And the other one who crossed parties was Rand Paul, Republican. He voted for the War Powers Resolution. But it failed. It did get a lot of support from the Democrats. And we'll see how things go in the House. In the House, if you're contacting your House representative, tell them to support the one introduced by Massey and Khanna. There's some tricks from the House Democrat leadership to do their own version that has way too much language that essentially could be used to justify giving, could be spun as giving the president actually the authority to bomb Iran. So the resolution that you want to support in the House was introduced by Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna. That's important if you're contacting your House representative and telling them to support it. All right, so the next one here, escalating Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon. This one is from Jason Ditz. So Israel is once again escalating its airstrikes against southern Lebanon over the weekend with a flurry of strikes killing at least 4 people and wounding dozens of others. As usual, Israeli officials are presenting one of the slain as a Hezbollah commander. So the attack started Friday with an airstrike on a residential building in Nabatea. At least 20 strikes were reported in the area, but one hit an apartment complex near the school, killing 1 woman and wounding at least 25. So these are significantly heavy strikes here. And the attacks continued on Saturday when Israeli drones targeted a car in Kunine, killing 1. The man was identified by the IDF as Hassan Mohammed Hamoudi, who they claimed was a Hezbollah commander. And a second strike in the area wounded 2 women. And then there was another strike late Saturday. They killed 2 people, including one on a motorcycle, and exactly who was killed has not been identified. So they are escalating the strikes in Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, the DR Congo and Rwanda sign a U.S. brokered peace deal. So I apologize. The format of this might be kind of annoying to look at on the screen because it's an archive that I'm going to have to scroll around. But so this was kind of interesting. Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo signed a U.S. brokered peace agreement on Friday in Washington, raising hope for an end to fighting that has killed thousands and displaced hundreds of thousands more so far this year. And the agreement marks a breakthrough in talks held by the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump, which also aim to attract billions of dollars of Western investments to a region rich in tantalum, gold, cobalt, copper, lithium, and other minerals. So that's a big part of this. Apparently, this deal will secure some investments in minerals by the U.S. And at a ceremony with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the two countries' foreign ministers signed the agreement, pledging to implement the 2024 deal that would see Rwandan troops withdraw from eastern Congo within 90 days, according to a version initialed by technical teams last week and seen by Reuters. And they're also going to launch a regional economic integration framework within 90 days. And Trump says that the United States are getting the U.S. is getting a lot of mineral rights from the Congo as part of the deal. He says that they're so honored to be in this situation with the U.S. Investing in the minerals, getting a piece of their natural resources. So this seems to be, the new Trump doctrine. I guess it's not really a new Trump doctrine, but, to justify interventions. I mean, brokering a peace deal is good, obviously. But it seems like any foreign policy move, if he can get a piece of some kind of natural resource, he's going to go for it. All right, so the next one here, the last story, Russian missiles and drones hit targets across Ukraine. So Russia launched a heavy drone and missile attack on targets across Ukraine overnight Saturday into Sunday as the war continues to rage with no end in sight, despite President Trump's earlier push for a ceasefire. So according to the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia fired 60 missiles and 477 drones and decoys. So that includes drones, lethal drones, and then ones that are not lethal, that the idea is to overwhelm the air defenses. And the Air Force claimed that they shot down about 90% of the projectiles, but it does look like impact was made across Ukraine. And a Ukrainian fighter pilot was killed, died in a crash while attempting to intercept Russian missiles and drones. He was in a U.S.-made F-16 fighter jet. And according to the New York Times, it's unclear if civilians were killed in this Russian barrage, though there was a woman reported killed by Russian shelling in Kherson in the south, but that was closer to the front line. And there's also heavy fighting in eastern Ukraine where Russian forces are making gains in Donetsk. And the Russian Defense Ministry said that they captured a settlement on Sunday. So essentially, if you look at this map from South Front here, it shows where a lot of the strikes were. Every single day, I mean, there's heavy attacks either across Ukraine. Sometimes there's heavy Ukrainian drone attacks, although those seem to have slowed down. For a while there, they were really firing a lot of drones into Russia, but it seems like now it's only a few or a few dozen every day. But also along the front line. So, I mean, the war is just raging as much as it has been. And there's just no end in sight at this point. It's a real shame. This is something I was hoping Trump would actually would end. But he continues to fuel the war with the military aid and with the intelligence. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints, one from Rick Sterling and Marcy Winograd, California legislation designed to protect Israeli genocide, one from Ted Snyder, U.S. bombing of Iran harms non-proliferation, one from Dan Steinbach, Trump's dream of escalation dominance, and one from Rosina Ali, they're here to detain me. Our spotlight is from Branko Marchteach, the Biden hawk behind Trump's Iran war. So please go check all that out. Lots of stuff at antiwar.com. I hope everybody had a good weekend. You could always support this show by liking, subscribing, commenting. All that stuff helps out. Follow us on social media. Sorry if I seemed a little out of it today. I just was had a ton of work to do today and didn't get the best sleep. But tomorrow's a new day. And anyway, I will be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.